Hi, friends. Happy Friday. I know it's been a minute since I've posted, but I just was enjoying my life and I'm not going to feel bad about that. Sometimes this work will call me to go into myself and just focus on my own stuff, my own rewiring, or just enjoying my life. And that's really what I've been doing the last few months is just really enjoying this beautiful life that I have curated for myself. Today, I really want to talk about early childhood, which is my specialty, and how that impacts us as we age, how it impacts how we feel about ourselves, how it impacts the relationships that we choose, the jobs that we choose, and just our life experiences in general. I'm also going to help bridge the gap between science and spirituality and give you some tips on how you can rewire your own brain so you can change the patterns of your life. I like taking a grounded approach. I'm really big into self-acceptance and love. And if you get anything out of this video, I want you to know that whatever you're feeling or going through is valid and real. And it's important to kind of understand why you are the way that you are so you can accept it or make changes, depending on what you want to do. So, when we're born, we have billions of neurons in our brain, and those neurons create connections through experiences. The more frequently used pathways get stronger, the ones that we don't use as often kind of fall off and die. It's a pruning process. Whatever a child repeatedly experiences gets hardwired as normal. Children don't create identity in isolation. They mirror what they receive. So if a child is receiving love and care and kindness, they will mirror that and they will internalize that they are loved and they are safe and they are cared for. On the contrary, if a child repeatedly experiences neglect, physical, emotional, mental abuse, if a child needs are not being met by a safe and grounded caregiver, then those stories get wired into that child's brain and it starts to become part of their identity. So again, their identity forms through reflection, through relationships. And this really happens with their primary caregivers. A child's nervous system is mirrored off of the mother's. So if the mother has self-respect, confidence, love, all of that good stuff, then the child's nervous system will mirror the same thing. If the mother's nervous system is stressed, is self-critical, the child's then nervous system will mirror the same thing. So it's really important as parents that we work on ourselves so our children have a chance for a better self-identity. I do not buy into we're all born sinners. If you really want to get me on my soapbox, I will talk about how religion and the Bible have been used to control you. But I also want you to see the wisdom in the Bible and the wisdom in a lot of what Jesus did come here to teach. While a lot of it has been misconstrued and changed for political and religious control, there are still a lot of gems in there. And I think any time that you can kind of bridge that connection between self and the divine, I want to do that. So again, repetition creates subconscious identity. And obviously, as a child, they are not conscious of why they have these stories, right? Some kids are. I have definitely seen some very wise children, but most of the time, children don't understand their patterns of behavior, and they shouldn't. It's really on the adults. But when a child feels loved and cared for, they're going to be wired for safety, and they're going to expect to be loved and cared for out in the world. But on the contrary, if a child is often criticized or made to feel not good enough, they will be wired for self-doubt. If a child is ignored and their needs are not met, they're going to be wired for invisibility. this pattern becomes the subconscious mind. So your parents' voice really does become your subconscious thoughts. So, parents, we need to be very careful of how we are talking to our children. This is the most important work that we have. This, how we talk to children, not just our own, but other. If you work with children as a teacher, as a coach, or in any other capacity, how you talk to those children matters far more than anything else you do in this life. How you show up for the children in your life, how you believe in them and create safe spaces for them is your most important work. The problem is, adults can't do that for children until they have done it for themselves. They just can't. It's not possible. So, again, we're going through this collective consciousness. We're going through this collective rewiring of these self-limiting beliefs that we all have internalized from our parents, from our caregivers, from our life experiences. When you grow up and your default mode is, I'm a troublemaker, I'm the shy one, I'm not good enough for emotional connection or what have you, that becomes your default mode. And emotional experiences wire faster than logic. So the feeling of the home that a child grows up in, the tone of the voice in which they're being spoken to, repeated emotional states are what is what's developed in the limbic system before the rational brain fully develops in the prefrontal cortex. So our identity is really shaped based off of the feelings and the tone of voice of the people that we love most. And again, whether it's good or bad, those become our belief systems. And those belief systems become filters. So if you believe, again, I'm lovable and I'm cared for and the world's a good place, your brain will seek out experiences that make you feel lovable and cared for and safe. If you grew up in a dysfunctional home, your brain is then wired for those same experiences. So if you grew up not feeling good enough, if you grow up not feeling safe, if you grow up not feeling loved, your brain then seeks out experiences to confirm that bias. Whether it's through a bad relationship or jobs or friendships or what have you. All of that is learned, but it's not fixed. We can change it. But it does take a lot of deep inner, what we call shadow work. You really have to dive deep and understand your thought patterns, your patterns of behavior, and why you think the way you think. If you grew up with your emotional experiences not validated, not felt as important, or kind of told you can't be emotional, you're then going to, again, seek out partners or life situations that confirm that. And we see that often in males where they are told, not to be emotional. They're not allowed to have emotional experiences unless it's on the sports field, which that's a whole nother story. Those males then seek out relationships that mirror that their emotions aren't important, that they don't matter. And we see a lot of that playing out. What we see playing out right now is, yes, there are a lot of unsafe men out there. We know that. But there are a lot more men that are safe. But if we keep repeating the story that men are unsafe, men are terrible, and what have you, that's only reaffirming what men kind of naturally already feel about themselves because of what's in the news or how they've been treated. Women tend to be allowed to be a bit more emotional, but then they can also be told that they're too much or they're too sensitive. So it's both genders, and we all have masculine and feminine energy inside of us, but both genders have kind of been placed in these boxes that should not exist and don't exist in the spiritual realms, but we have adopted here as normal. And I'm here to break all that up because it's not normal. both men and women are extremely valuable. We need both masculine and energies inside of us and in relationships. That kind of is what brings the polarity. But it's important to understand how somebody is wired first, how you're wired first, and then to kind of break out into the world. So if you haven't done your shadow work and you're kind of just running on these subconscious programs, again, that you're not aware of, and you're just living your life, you're going to keep attracting the same experiences as your childhood. And when I had my Kundalini awakening, it was kind of so mind-boggling to me how I repeated the exact same pattern with my parents, with my then peers. You know, I had a dad who was very abusive and not emotionally connected and really unhappy. And what happens in relationships is when we have one parent that is a problem, I'm going to just because that's easiest, a problem in some way, we then subconsciously repeat that exact same pattern in our adult relationships in hopes that this time it will be different. So a lot of times what happens is when you're neglected or just not treated well, what have you, you're going to repeat that in hopes that you can change this other person. But really, if you're repeating patterns, that's a cue that it's inside you. It's never outside you. Everything kind of stems from inside. So it's important to understand those patterns and break free of them. And, I don't mind sharing some of my story because one, I'm not ashamed of it, but if it helps people understand this a little bit better, my mom left when I was, 6, 7, and she was in and out of my life for a long time, never consistent, kind of traveling all around, sometimes really loving, sometimes really not. You just never knew what you were going to get. My dad was extremely volatile. You never knew what was going to set him off. Like, you never knew when he was just going to absolutely lose his mind and scream and yell and cuss. And you just never knew. Like, it was explosive. You honestly never knew. It could be a holiday. It could be a random Tuesday. You didn't know. Same thing with my stepmom. You just never knew. So I repeated that pattern. And as a child, I always felt very much torn between my dad and my mom. They never got along. They always made holidays and birthdays like absolutely miserable for me. And I always felt torn between the two. So guess what I did as an adult? I married the man that felt safe, like my dad made me believe that he was safe and stable. He was not. And, my dad was a rich white man and my husband was not those things. And so I really thought that I was doing something different, but emotionally they were the same. They were emotionally neglectful, abusive, charming on the outside, but on the inside, just kind of evil and insecure. And I really thought that if I loved my partner enough, he would overcome those insecurities and realize how great I was, because ultimately that's what I wanted for my dad. And this is all unconscious, of course. Like, it wasn't like I went into this knowing, but that's what happened. At the same time, I had a friend who lived in Florida who was hot and cold, inconsistent, just never know what you're going to get from him. And I always felt torn between the two. So when I had my awakening and I was like, holy shit, I literally just mirrored my childhood experiences to a T in hopes that this time it would be different. And this time my mom would choose me, my dad would be loving. What do you think happened? None of those things. I was still torn between the two. They were still hot and cold and inconsistent. They were still emotionally abusive, and it did not matter how much I loved them. It did not matter how much I believed in them. If they weren't doing the work, if they weren't trying to change, if they weren't showing up, understanding themselves, there was nothing that I could do to change that experience. But subconsciously, we want to rewrite that story. We want to rewrite the experiences of our childhood and believe that this time can be different. And we think subconsciously, again, by doing this externally, that it will fix us internally. But the work really is that you have to fix yourself internally first, and then your external will change. And it was never my job to fix my parents or make them love me more or make them be more supportive or kind or less insecure. It was their job to fix that. And by mirroring that in my relationships, it, again, like repeated that story for me that I'm not enough. My love's not enough. Nothing I can do will change the situation or make these people believe in themselves. And ultimately, that was the truth. It wasn't my job. But when I had my awakening, that pattern became so clear to me that I had no choice but to walk away, because I am not, my childhood was terrible. Like, I'm not doing that again. And I had already done it for so long in my adulthood that it was time for me to choose myself and work on myself and rewire my belief stories about myself. And I did have to separate from those people, because I've said it before, energy is contagious. So by me staying around my family who continuously wanted to tell me that I wasn't good enough, I didn't know what I was talking about, I wasn't smart, I was the troublemaker, I was too much, even to the point where they would consistently tell me my children were also too much, I would have never been able to break free from that programming that they had instilled in me since birth. I was never too much. I definitely came into my family to disrupt the systems. I could see the dysfunction from very early on. I could see how dysfunctional my father was. I could see how dysfunctional my mother was. And I really tried hard as a kid to fight against that. But when you're a child fighting against a parent, that's just hard. My dad used money as a form of control up until I left. And even after that, he tried. I physically, energetically cannot be around those people, because they are damaging. They're damaging to my self-identity. They're damaging to me energetically. I think they're damaging to most people that they're around. But you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of how other people are affecting you, how other people are treating you. And you really have to be aware of where the patterns of your own life come from. It's childhood. And I would venture to say your past lives too. My past life story is that, duty and obligation always outweighed love for me. And for me, love is the most important. I think duty and obligation kind of come second to love, but I tend to attract partners who put duty and obligation first. And that is a past life story of mine that has replayed time and time and time again. Replayed with my dad, it replayed, with other partners. And I've really had to do a lot of shadow work to break that pattern and recognize that that is a pattern in myself, and that I am looking for confirmation bias from my external world that confirms that, yeah, men pick duty and obligation over love. And doesn't matter how much they love me, job, money, other obligations will always come first. And now, for the most part, I know that's not true, but it's still something that I am working on and discovering and recognizing that pattern in myself so I can break it. And again, acceptance is always the first piece. You have to accept, I am very intuitive. I know things before they happen. I can communicate with people telepathically. I just have a lot of spiritual gifts. And I was around a lot of people who denied that, because I could see things in them that they didn't want me to see. I could see that they were insecure. I could see that they were unhappy. I could see that they were jealous. And they didn't like that I could see that. So instead of supporting me or uplifting me and be like, you know what, you actually do know what you're talking about, they would talk down to me. They would try to dismiss me or try to make me believe that what I knew to be true wasn't true. So if I stayed in those relationships out of loyalty or duty or what have you, like I would never grow. I would never have the opportunity to change what I believe. And I have done a lot of work on myself, and I continue to do a lot of work on myself to change my own bias. When you're negative, when you're always unhappy, when you're not grateful, when you don't care about other people or yourself, what happens is your external world will reflect that back to you. If you're always negative, you're always complaining, I've said this before, negative things are going to continue to happen to you, even if they're minor. But it's confirmation bias. It's like your brain is literally seeking out negative experiences to confirm that, yeah, you're right. But if you're positive and grateful and just loving and kind to yourself, then your external world will start to show that. The problem that most people have is the time that they decide, okay, I'm changing, I'm going to believe a different story, until the time it shows up in their external world, that can take some time. And can you hold a belief about yourself long enough for the external world to reflect it? Most people cannot. You know, if you believe I'm lovable and I'm beautiful and what have you, but you don't have the people you like approaching you, or you're not in a relationship, or you've been single for a long time, the tendency to revert back to the old story of I'm not good enough, I'm not beautiful, I'm not lovable, it's quick, it can happen fast. So your job is to stay steadfast in your own self-identity until the external world reflects that. And one of the things that where you can kind of see this the easiest is people who are trying to lose weight. And most people who have ever tried to lose weight can confirm this. When you feel heavy and you're trying to lose weight, nothing's changing, or you're looking in the mirror and you're focused on the external as opposed to the internal. So you look at the external and you're telling yourself negative things about yourself. It's going to keep happening. It's going to keep being a problem. You're not going to lose the weight because you're affirming to yourself that I'm overweight, I'm fat, I'm this, and I'm that, right? But once you start losing the weight, you start feeling confident. You're looking in yourself in the mirror. You're like, damn, I look good, right? That self-talk then motivates you to want to keep at it, right? So that's just like the easiest kind of physical example I can say. I'm sure for bodybuilders, it's the same thing. You're lifting weights, nothing's changing yet. But if you don't continue the story of I'm strong, I'm capable, you're going to give up. So you have to keep at the story until the external is reflecting what's happening on the internal. So you have to change your internal stories first before you change the external. Most people are operating from the external decides what's happening on the internal. So, you know, your money's not good. So you tell yourself negative stories about that, or the weight, or the relationships, or the job, or what have you. Society, you know, we see this with racism a lot, right? Like society's putting out all of these negative, I don't even know what the right word is, but just negative theories, I can say. And that becomes a bias in people's brains. And they either become racist or are the product of experiencing racism. And it can really shape the way that people feel about themselves. And our job is to develop our own identity. And I will say in God and in Christ, because I don't know if I could have done it without having that pillar for myself. So for me, that was very important, is creating my identity in God, in Jesus, and how God created me and not in how the people that I loved and cared about treated me. Because if I had stuck with my identity based off of how the people in my life were treating me, I would still be miserable. I would be unhappy, and I would be in relationships that were not good for me. But when I accepted my identity in God, in Christ, and I saw a reflection of Jesus's teachings and biblical prophecies within myself and within my own life, that is what shaped me. And, God will call you into a period of isolation because he is shaping your identity in that moment through him. And so he can't have you around a bunch of other people that are going to make you question yourself, question your identity, question the mission and purpose he has for you. He's going to call you into isolation because he is shaping your identity. He is refining you like silver. And yes, he will put you through the fire, and he will just really kind of burn all your edges, and it's painful and it hurts. And it's not emotionally easy to walk away from people that you've been in a relationship, a friendship, a family dynamic with your whole life. But if those people are damaging your identity in Christ, I can guarantee you that Christ wants you to walk away from that. He does not want you to be in relationships that confirm that you're not good enough, that you're not lovable, that you're not safe. He wants you to know, and again, just for clarification, I do not believe that God is a man. God is an energy. It's a higher consciousness. I feel like I have to explain that a lot, but God is not a man. But for me, I don't have a problem with masculinity, so I do not have a problem calling him he. And I think it's just easier. So he is not wanting you to feel unloved and unsafe. He is wanting you to know how loved and safe you are in him first and foremost, and then in yourself, and then he can show it to you throughout the world. And it's going to show up in friendships. It's going to show up in how people just treat you in the community. It's going to show up in romantic partnerships. The belief systems that we have about ourselves will always reflect back to us in our relationships. Those are our clues. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who's not valuing your presence, your experience, who's not treating you with kindness or care, respect, are you feeling that way about yourself? Are they just reflecting what you're doing to yourself? Do you value yourself enough to walk away from people who treat you poorly or don't care about your experiences, despite your circumstances, despite if you have kids together, despite if you've been friends or partners or what have you? I was friends with a girl for 20 years. And she always treated me poorly and would make jokes at my expense, but it didn't really bother me until it did, until I noticed what she was doing. She was a very insecure and jealous person, and she did not feel good about herself, even though she presented to the world differently. On the inside, she didn't feel that way. So she would tear down everybody around her. And because I was used to that, I just accepted it, and it just didn't bother me. But when I recognized that how damaging that pattern was, I walked away and haven't looked back. And, I share these stories because I do think it's important to understand how they show up in not just your romantic relationship, but in friendships too. That, again, your internal belief system is going to be reflected in your external world. So when we talk about manifestation, it's not about controlling the external. It's about becoming into alignment with who you are. And, I have very strong feelings about the Bible and religion and how it's been used to control us, right? I also am a firm believer that if you really look back at the language that the Bible was originally written in, it was Amharic and Greek, that the words that they used have been loosely translated and again used in religion to control us. So people will say Jesus died for your sins. No, he died because of sin. He died because people did not want to believe that he was divine and he was a messenger of God. And he was killed for teaching people how they could govern their own lives and they could change their own stories. And that is still being played out to us. We see it. We see it being played out now throughout religion, throughout our politics. And I have talked about this kind of demise of narcissism for a couple years now. And we're seeing that play out. You can see that play out in the news. I don't watch the news, but like you can see it. You can see it happening where these narcissists who have thrived on power and control, ultimately because they're super insecure, but they have thrived off of that, are crumbling. Those systems are crumbling. People are awakening that they are divine beings. And that is what Jesus came here to teach. He came here to teach you manifestation and energy work and really how to change your life. And it's just been shifted and changed into not what he was really teaching. So I want to break down a little bit of kind of Bible verses that you can look at to help you support rewiring your own brain so you can have these divine experiences. We are all born lovable. And I know that Christianity and will teach you that we're all born sinners. And that, like, come on. God loved us so much. He made us be born as sinners. Like, no. He loved us so much that he brought us to earth to help heal our souls so we can go back to him full and whole and understand our own divinity, but respect the divinity of others too. How you treat yourself is important, but how you treat others is just as important too. And when I was in relationship with people who treated me poorly, oftentimes they would treat, the external world nice. So it was very confusing. It really reinforced that story that I was the problem, and they loved that. My family and that ex and whatever, like they loved telling me that I was the problem, but baby, I was not the problem. Like I could see how they were treating me was wrong. And I could see, and I don't have a problem calling people out, like God really didn't want me knowing my spiritual gifts when I was really hot tempered, because I would not have used all my powers for good, but now I do. So it's fine. It is so important how you treat yourself and how you treat others. And when you see somebody treating other people poorly, it really is because they think very poorly of themselves. Somebody who thinks of themselves highly, somebody who loves themselves and sees the divinity in themselves is not going to treat other people poorly. The people who treat other people poorly are people who are insecure, don't find themselves lovable, and are really just self-critical and mean. So you want to stay away from people like that, not just because they're treating you poorly, but energy is contagious. I didn't like the person that I was when I was around those people, because again, I have no problem standing up for myself or others. I fight back. So being around those people was not conducive to who I am at my core, who is very loving and kind and positive. I'm loving and kind and positive, but I will cut a bitch's throat if I have to. And I grew up that way. It was self-protection. I had to. And I don't love that side of myself. I don't love the side of myself who really can cut you off at the knees. So I just choose not to be around people who operate in that energy. It doesn't feel good to me. I don't want to help you fix yourself. Like, go fix yourself and then we can be cool. But until then, stay far, far away. But Jesus really came to talk to us about manifestation. And again, we think that manifestation means controlling the outcome, but it doesn't. It's really about coming into alignment. So, we say as above, so below, as within, so without. What those things mean is your higher self, as above, is the same. You want to get into alignment. You want to bring your higher self into this physical body and embody that loving, kind, whatever your higher self is, smart, intelligent, funny, creative, all of those things. You want to kind of bring that into this world. That's what our job is. It's not to be separate soul and body, 3D, 5D. It's to merge the two. And the way that you can merge the two is you solidify your identity inside, and then that will reflect outside. So some of the Bible verses, Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So if you think evil in your heart, so are you, right? If you think loving and kind, so are you. Romans 12:12, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It is important to constantly learn and grow and question things. That's important. So constantly renewing your mind, coming back into alignment, really being aware, understanding that your soul is not your mind, being the observer of these thoughts, understanding where they're coming from, the story, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not pretty enough. Where are those thoughts coming from? Be the observer as opposed to the person who's just experiencing it and thinking, okay, if I thought it must be true. No, observe those thoughts and figure out where they're coming from. Your thoughts shape your reality. This goes back to that confirmation bias. 2 Corinthians 10:5, take every thought captive. It goes back to what I said of really looking at your thoughts, being the observer. We have neuroplasticity. So while our pathways can die in childhood when they're not used, we do have neuroplasticity. So we can build new connections. And that will happen through new relationships. It will happen through learning and being curious, reading, all of those things. Again, if we're not using these pathways, if we're not taking advantage of our neuroplasticity, as we get older, that ability kind of decreases a little bit more. Focusing on what is true, noble, and right. Keeping your heart pure. While I understand that the abuse that I experienced in my childhood and in my relationships was not my fault, it was abusive and it was terrible. I also can understand why those people are the way that they are, which is why I hung around for as long as I did. I knew why they were like that. I was very well aware. I was trying to help them. So I don't hold anger or hatred towards these people. Do I feel anger at times? Sure. I feel angry for the child that I was who had to experience a father and a mother and a stepmother like I had, or a sister, quite frankly, because she played a large part in my abuse, like from the time I was an infant. I really, so yeah, I do feel anger. I do feel anger at times for how I was treated in my marriage, but I don't hold on to that because at the end of the day, I know that that was a part of my journey that I needed to go through to get to this place of breaking these patterns, not only for myself, but for my children and for my family. So again, what you repeatedly think, you're neurologically wiring in your brain, and then you spiritually reinforce through that confirmation bias. So getting very clear on your self-identity, getting really clear on who you are in Christ. And quite frankly, if you're an asshole, you're an asshole, and you got to get clear on that too. Like, it's not just, oh, I've been a good person and I'm loving and kind. No, if you've been an asshole, you need to come to a reckoning with that too. And that's where a lot of the breakdown has happened for people, is they don't want to admit that the way that they have treated people is terrible, that they have used people to get ahead, that they've used people energetically, they've used people sexually. They are just users because they are ultimately very insecure. That's a harsh reckoning. But that's where the narcissist comes into play. If you're not coming to that awareness of, yeah, I've been an asshole and I got to fix that, that's where these narcissistic personality traits are happening, is because you're not willing to have a true and honest look at yourself, how you've treated yourself and how you've treated other people. Okay, so that is very important. Be honest. Have you been an asshole? Have you been loving and kind? Have you allowed people to walk all over you? You know, coming I said it before, I'm a fighter. I fight back. But recognizing how I was letting these people walk all over me for so long, that was a hard thing to have to come to terms with. It's like, what do you mean? I fight back. Like, I don't allow this to happen to other people, but I allowed it to happen to myself. I really put my love for them above the love for myself. And that was wrong. Like, I was wrong for doing that. And I can't just blame, my ex-partner, because I participated in that. I allowed that to happen. I should have walked away a gazillion years ago. It was my own programming that led me into that relationship. So I can't just blame the other person. And that's important, is that you come to terms with, I allowed this to happen. I allowed myself to be mistreated. I allowed myself to stay out of duty and obligation, out of fear, because I didn't love myself enough. And baby, I know that hurts. Like, it hurts to be like, what do you mean I didn't love myself enough? I work out every day. I do this. I take care of myself. But deep in your core, there was something telling you that you deserved that mistreatment. And I know that I stayed for as long as I did in situations because I did believe I deserved that treatment. Those people told me, but I was reinforcing that to myself. I truly and honestly believed that I deserved to be in an abusive relationship because I was torn, right? Because I felt so much shame and guilt in my life that I accepted it. And that was on me. And I take full responsibility and accountability for that in my own life now. And that's important. So it's understanding who you are in your own identity also means to coming to a reckoning with who you've been and what you've allowed in your life and what you've done in your life. Both of those things really matter, and you really have to get to the core of who you are without all those other stories. And again, if you go through a period of isolation, it's okay. You have to have that time to spiritually, mentally, and emotionally process what you've been through, to kind of burn it out so you can welcome the new, right? Okay. So faith is the expectation that rewires the brain. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, Hebrews 11:1, Mark 11:24, believe that you have received it. So this part is probably the most important part, and it goes back to where I was talking about holding the internal long enough for the external to show you. And this is where people will drop off because it's hard. Sometimes it can take a while. You really have to hold steady in your belief. The one thing that I was 100% sure on, you could not have placed a seed of doubt into my mind, was about my children and I moving to Florida. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that this was the best thing for me and my kids. I knew that God was going to provide the money. I told my kids, I don't know where we're moving, but I know He's building a house for me, for us. And I had never had so much faith in something in my entire life. I did not have the money. I did not have the credit. I did not know how I was going to make it happen, but I just knew. And I started speaking about it. And I started telling people, we're moving. I know we're moving to Florida. I don't know where. I have no idea. But just that faith of a mustard seed, just that belief that I knew that this was going to happen is what made it possible. And it was through the repetition of, I would write it in my journal of how I wanted this to happen and how I wanted the co-parenting to look. And, as much as I don't like how I was treated in that marriage, I'm always going to be nice to my ex because he's the father of my kids. I will be honest with my kids about who he is, in a appropriate way, I should say. But I was writing how I wanted my co-parenting to be. I was writing how I wanted the neighborhood to feel. And all of that came true. It was through the repetition of meditation and just kind of being happy, kind of knowing that it was going to happen. And that's what made it happen. And while I had talked about moving to Florida for a very long time, when I came back on January 1st and I said, we're moving in 6 months, and I meant it, we moved in 6 months. It was my belief that without a shadow of a doubt, this is happening. That's what made it possible. And I came into alignment with that reality by packing up our stuff and just getting all of those little things in pieces. And the way that He worked it out for me, the way that we sold our house, the money that we got, all of that is what made it possible. And I didn't have to worry about how and when and what have you. I just had to have the faith and the action in knowing that this is real. So believing that what you want, you've already received it. If you want love, if you want money, if you want community, just believing that it's already mine and holding that belief so strong until it becomes a reality, and being grateful for the preparation period, which is not easy. Nobody likes to wait. We want what we want and we want it now. But that preparation period really is important. It builds that faith muscle. It builds your self-esteem. It builds your confidence. It's like going to football practice or any other sports practice, right? Most people don't love it. They want to go to the games, but it builds your muscles. And that's an important part of the process. And I'm sorry, my light keeps turning off and I'm not going to mess with it at this point. If I can. That's important. So again, building your faith muscle. Joshua 1:8, meditate on it day and night. Hold that belief system. Psalms 1 and 2, delight and meditate continually. Just really trusting and believing that if this is what I want for my life, it's going to happen. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I'm going to hold the belief that this is mine and it's for me. The neuroscience of that is repetition, like we talked about, strengthens neural pathways. So the more faith that you have and the more repetition that you have in speaking about your dreams, talking about it, believing that it's a reality, it's creating those pathways in your brain that will allow it to happen. Faith trains your brain to live as if the promise is already yours. And that is true of just really kind of, again, believing that it's yours and operating as such. Biblical meditation is spiritual repetition that builds new neural circuits. So the more that we meditate, the more that we pray, the more that we journal, the more that we dig deep into that this is mine, it's building those neural pathways. Our words reinforce more than anything else. Uh, they don't just express your reality, they help construct it internally. How you talk to yourself matters more than anything else. And again, your subconscious programming is developed by the time you're 7. So, how you subconsciously talk to yourself mirrors how your parents talk to you as a child. So, if my parents were telling me I was too much, I wasn't good enough, wasn't lovable, my emotions were too much, all of that, that became my subconscious programming. So, I had to rewire all of that as an adult and believe in the power of how I spoke to myself. And even still to this day, I do have a high level of confidence, and it's not based in anything other than my spirit and my soul and my identity in Christ. But I'm still a human. I'm still in the 3D world. So there are times that I will revert back, and the story that I'm telling myself is that I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not lovable, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, or this life isn't meant for me, um, or I'm gonna look stupid. All of that has come up. And it's through repetition of changing that story, me observing when those thoughts are coming up for me and saying, that's not true. I am beautiful. I am worthy. I am smart. And I'm definitely good enough. So reinforcing that, speaking on it, there's power in the tongue. It's that speaking, it's not magic, it's reinforcement. Again, it's reinforcing those neural pathways in your brain so you can create new pathways, new experiences, so your external world will start to reflect that. Your identity is the core of your manifestation. So if your identity is based with the people around you, your family, your spouse, your friends, your job, and that reflection isn't that of Christ, you're going to be manifesting from a false identity. And this happens, all the time. So until you get really clear on who you are with that unshakable faith, you're going to be manifesting life from somebody else's point of view. And life was just way too short to be doing that. I recently heard about a gentleman that I went to high school with, and he just passed away. And it was, I'm 42. And to think that people my age are passing, it just is a reminder of how short life is. And I don't want to live my life for somebody else, and not my spouse, not my kids, not my friends, not my job. I want to live my life for myself. And that doesn't mean I'm selfish. It doesn't mean that I don't take care of others. A big part of me is taking care of others. A big part of my identity is caring and loving others. It's something I enjoy. It's something I'm passionate about. It's something I'm meant to do. I'm meant to fill people up with love. Had to give it to myself first, but I am meant to do that. So living for yourself doesn't make you selfish, but it is teaching the world, the universe, people around you who you are. So if you're, again, living life to please everybody else, you're staying in a relationship because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, you're scared of hurting your kids, I want you to recognize that you're hurting your children more by staying in a dysfunctional and unloving relationship that is not honoring who you are at the core. You're denying the world your gifts because you're basing your identity in these roles that are not really yours. So, identity is the core of manifestation. And, 2 Corinthians 5:17. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. And I felt like I lived that through my awakening of recognizing how God loved me so much that he was willing to, with all of my mistakes, with all of my flaws, he was still willing to come and get me and pluck me out of the situation I was in, changed me. And it changed the way that I thought about myself and other people. And, you know, it renewed in the spirit of my mind. It renewed me. I did become anew. I was reborn in this image that God had for me, and not in the image that my parents and my spouse and these whack ass friends had of me. I can't stress that enough. See yourself through God's eyes, see other people's through God's eyes. And if you're having people that are imposing their beliefs of you on you, and they're not positive and they're not good and they're not in alignment with who God is telling you you are, that's your sign that those people are not meant to be in your life. We call those handlers. You need to get away from your handlers because they are here to keep you in a negative framework. They're here to keep you in lack. They're here to keep you in fear. They're here to keep you tied to duty and obligation. And I'll say it again, your government contracts are not spiritual unions. Those are not protected by God. He does not care about your government contract marriage. Like, he does not. Your karma is having kids with somebody you weren't supposed to, who most likely you knew you weren't supposed to marry, you knew you weren't supposed to procreate with, but you did it anyways because society or whoever told you it was the best thing. So your karma is you got to deal with those consequences. You got to get divorced. You got to make some moves. It's hard to live with that, and nobody wants to hurt other people. Like, most people, some people do, definitely been around some that do, but most people don't really want to hurt other people. But if by you not hurting other people is ultimately hurting yourself, you really need to take a look at why you are so willing to self-sacrifice, because he's not asking you to do that. You're not Jesus, right? Like, he's not asking you. Quite frankly, he didn't ask Jesus to pin himself to the cross either. He asked the people around him to listen and believe and understand in his divinity. And when they didn't, they pinned him to the cross. Jesus is not asking you to do the same. He is asking you to not self-sacrifice and to honor who God made you to be. Okay, so that's important. So focus determines what your brain allows you to see and pursue. If I believe I am abundant and rich and worthy and capable of holding money, those opportunities will come to me. But if I believe that in lack, or I believe I'm broke or poor or not capable of earning more or doing this work or what have you, my focus will go there. So where you focus matters. Are you focusing on the good in yourself? Are you focusing on where you need to grow? Are you focusing on those stories that you tell yourself, or are you too busy focused on what everybody else thinks of you? I have spent way too much time in my life focused on what everybody else thinks of me. And quite frankly, those people don't matter to me anyways. So it's like I needed to be focused on how I thought about myself. True manifestation in the Bible is co-creation with God. It's not self-driven control. I'm not in control of every outcome. I can tell God that I want a loving relationship in my life, but I can't stomp my feet and demand it and instantly get it. That's not the way it works. So it's really me trusting God and saying, okay, you know, I want a loving relationship. You know, I want, this divine union that sets my soul on fire but brings my spirit peace. And I'm going to trust in your timing of that, because if I settled for something that wasn't that, I'm going to miss out on what is meant for me. So it's not about me forcing narratives or forcing connections or getting on dating apps or, trying so hard to meet people. It's trusting that the people in my life will be brought into my life when they're supposed to be there. And, I've had 3 connections over my life that were serious. And quite frankly, I dreamt of those people when I was a kid. And I haven't told most of them that, but I did. And I distinctly remember that dream. And each one of them were key players in the development of my self identity, not all in good ways, but they were all divine connections that I had made. Just, I didn't try, I wasn't trying to meet anybody, like it just happened. And while they were not all loving connections, they were really important for me to understand myself. So again, while I did not love the way that those people treated me, it was really important for me to have those experiences so I could learn boundaries and I could understand the patterns of behavior and understand narcissism and insecurity and see how, because I was operating in a place of insecurity, I was attracting people that were operating in the same. And just by polarity, because I was more of the people pleaser, I was attracting people who were more dominant in a way and kind of just giving my life over to them as opposed to giving my life over to God, right? And letting Him have control. So now it's a matter, and baby, I like to be in control too. So, me and God, we go toe to toe sometimes about Him telling me stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make these videos. I don't want to be out in public. Like, I like just meeting people on the streets and helping them there. But it's a matter of like really letting go of that control and trusting that if He's called me to it, it's because I'm built for it and I know what I'm doing, and letting go of that fear of looking stupid or that I don't know enough. And just trusting the process, right? So trust God, not your own understanding. His will ultimately will be done. And I know that people struggle with that when we have war and these rape academies and like all of this weird, bad stuff that's happening. But karma comes into that a little bit, which is a hard pill for most people to swallow. But a lot of that it can be used for our own good. And I'm really good at flipping stories to make them positive. It's probably somewhat of a flaw of mine, because I can make anything sound good. But to really see the good that can come out of even the bad situations. I didn't grow up with a mom, and that was really, really hard. I did grow up in a very abusive household. Both my stepmom and my dad were extremely mentally and emotionally abusive. And had I not been the fighter, they probably would have been physically abusive too. But baby, I do fight back. So that would have not landed well for anybody. But I needed that to become a better mom. I am 20 times the parent that all of my parents were combined. I'm better than them in every single way. And while my dad had money, that did not make him a good parent or person. Quite frankly, I think that the money kind of made him a little evil in some ways. Or made him feel more important than he is. So leaning into that, everything happens for a reason, and I needed that for my own growth so I could break the system, so I could learn to speak out, so I could learn to have boundaries, so I could learn to stick up for other people. I, from a very early age, was always fighting with my dad on how he treated my sister or things like that. Like, I've been sticking up for the underdog, if you will, since I was very little. That's just a core part of my personality. And I needed those experiences with somebody who was as strong as my dad to then be able to fight the other demons that came into my life. um, Gratitude accelerates both spiritual alignment and brain rewiring. Again, it goes back to that confirmation bias of if you're believing in positivity and if you're thankful for your opportunities and just grateful for this life, more of that will show up for you. Um, if you know me personally, you know that I love and adore my friends to the point of it could be somewhat of an obsession. Like, I just adore them to pieces. I think that they're the best women on the planet. And a lot of that came from having friends who were the opposite prior to them. So it does make me so grateful to have these women who are beautiful and smart, intelligent, funny, fun, um, supportive. Like, I'm so incredibly appreciative of this group of women that I'm around, and I have a core group of women that I'm around, and then I have, other women from various circles that are in my life, and having them as a pillar of support and love just is the best thing ever. And being grateful for that, I feel like just being so grateful for the love that I have has only expanded that more. Our circle's gotten bigger, our friendships have gotten stronger. We really do feel like a family. And I think, again, just having gratitude for that is so important. And it makes me believe how lovable I am and how, I distinctly remember telling my ex one time, like, why is it so hard to love me? And that's so sad. Just, that's sad that I had felt that for so long. um, from my parents to then my partner, like, people that I'd chosen in my life really made it seem like I was so hard to love. And now I have people in my life who make it seem so easy. I'm like, I know it's easy to love me, so what's wrong with you? But gratitude. I am the kind who like loves the sunsets and the butterflies and the birds and like just really am appreciative of life because I have lived in such a dark place. I did not mean to cry in this video, so I'm trying to get it together. But being grateful for the beautiful life that you have, that you're still alive, that you get to watch the sunrise. I'm trying to pull it together. I'm struggling. Being grateful for the relationships that you have, being grateful for the love that's around you. And if you don't have that, I pray that you do feel that. I pray that you feel it from the divine, that you feel it from God, that you know that you're important. Because we're all important. Even those shitty people in my life, they're important too, and it's so important to be grateful for the good, the bad. We only get one life in this body, and it is very short. I'm really struggling, so I'm going to have to end this quickly, but it is very short. So honor that. It doesn't live life to the fullest. It doesn't mean you never get to rest. It doesn't mean you never get to sit around and read a book, but it does mean that you take your life so seriously that you're not willing to entertain anything less than what you deserve. And that you know that having fun and being loved is such an important part of this experience. I'm struggling, y'all. I'm trying to get it together. I'm a crier. I am definitely a crier, so I'm trying. Be grateful. Be grateful that you've had people that have lived before you that have gone through things that you'll never have to experience. Be grateful for who you are and the challenges that you face and that you have the ability to overcome them. Be grateful for how all of these symbols of the beautiful world work together, and be grateful for community, because over these next 20 years, community really is going to be the most important. It always has been, but that Pluto and Leo generation just really fucked that up for the rest of us. And kind of disintegrated community. And it is our job now to remind ourselves, and we saw it throughout COVID, that your community, the people that you surround yourself with, are the most important people. They impact you on a cellular and spiritual level. When you surround yourself with positive people, people who believe in you, it's that confirmation bias, right? So it's going back to rewiring your brain, rewiring your patterns. Finally, action completes the process. So taking action, faith without works is dead, right? Taking action on your plans, on your desires. For me, it was packing up my house before I knew how we were going to sell my old house. But it was me taking action, me having faith that it's all going to work out. It's those two things working together is what made my move possible. So whatever it is you want to do, you want to build your business, you want to build a loving relationship, you want to build a community, you want to build a stronger identity, it's faith that you have the ability to do it and actions taken towards that. It doesn't mean you have to grind every day. Rest is important. Play is even more important. But it does mean that you have to chip away at those blocks, whatever it is that is keeping you ultimately from that life that you want. You have to take the actionable steps. If you want a new house, you have to qualify for a mortgage. So you have to call the bank, you have to get a realtor, you have to do all these things, right? There are actions that you have to take to bring yourself into alignment. If you want to start your own business, you have to take the actions to do that. If I want to help people on a global level, I can't just talk to my neighbors and my friends and the random strangers that God brings into my life. I have to be willing to put myself out there and trust that if He's calling me to do this, no matter how uncomfortable it makes me, that He's giving me the ability to connect with people on an emotional and intellectual level. And that's important. So me taking action, me saying, I'm dismissing all of the voices in my head that tell me I'm not good enough, to tell me I'm not worthy, that have tried to dismiss my intuition, and staying away from the people that continually try to do that. That's taking action too. So it's, again, it's refining who you are and the actions that you take. If you want to lose weight, you have to take the actions, right? It's either eating healthier, going for walks, going to the gym, what have you. It's not going to just be, it just miraculously happens. So, well, miracles do exist. Take action and you'll see your plans accelerate just by you taking a little bit of action. Just by me packing that first box led to us selling the house in what was a miraculous way. So you don't just have to believe differently, you have to act differently. And that those two things together will bring the change. So I know this was a long video, but I haven't had a video in a long time. I share my own stories, not to publicly shame those people. They can do that themselves. But it's to help people see my own story and why I am able to talk about these things, because I grew up strong, but my internal stories were not good ones because of the people that I was around. And I've had to do a lot of shadow work to break that. And I don't mind sharing the good and the bad of my experience, because I think that it can help somebody who says, oh, I didn't ever think that. You know, if you're dealing with narcissism abuse, especially if it's covert narcissism, it is very, very, very difficult to get out of. Those people are very nice and charming and say and do all of the right things in public, and then at home treat you awful. And they really do make you believe that you're the problem. And getting out of those situations, getting out of those relationships, especially if you experienced it in your early childhood too, is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And you're going to feel like nobody's going to believe me. And at times you won't even believe yourself. I've questioned myself so many times and have watched so many videos and whatnot, trying to understand the emotional and narcissistic abuse that I experienced in both my marriage and my childhood. And it's difficult when somebody presents themselves in one way and is treating you in another, and how that shapes your internal story. And if you're still dabbling in that relationship because it's confusing, trust me, I get it. And it's really difficult to get out of. But at some point, you have to recognize that the harm from these relationships is really sabotaging your self-identity. It's sabotaging your life. It's holding you back from everything possible for you. And you do sometimes just have to take the leap of faith and say, you know what? I don't know what's wrong with you. All I know is I don't like who I am with you, and I don't like who you are with me. And I want to get out of here and take those steps. So whatever it is you're going through, recognize you aren't alone. Everybody is shifting. We're downloading these new programs of love and unity consciousness, and we're shifting. Our world's evolving. And if the people around you aren't evolving with you, get new people, because there are so many people out there who see the patterns in our government and in relationships and in religion, and they're breaking free, and they are seeing the divinity in themselves. And those people are going to be the ones that pour life into you. And we deserve to be seen as whole and divine, not just broken products of our childhood. So again, I know this is long, but I think that this is such an important topic, and I see so many people operating from this wounded sense of self. And if there's anything that I could do in this world, it would be to help people love themselves and see themselves through God's eyes, not only for themselves, but for the people that are in their lives, and children, most importantly. We as adults are the generation that we're raising our kids. We're raising our neighbors' kids. We're in this, and we are now the adults that need to step up and take control of our emotional systems, our limbic system, and make the changes so that our children don't have to struggle with their self-identity the way that we did, and that we can pour into them in the way that we deserve to have people pour into us. So if you need help with any of this, if you need help understanding your patterns, breaking your patterns, rewiring your brain, or if you just need somebody to feel seen and heard and understood, reach out. I am happy to support you. I have kind of redone some of my services on my website, where I'm not just focusing on astrology, where that's a big part of my understanding of systems. It's not the only part. And I really do want people to feel grounded in themselves and in their dreams, and just really show up in the way that God designed them to. So if you need help, reach out, unexpectedempress.com. You can find my phone number and my email there. And just remember that you are loved, and you're worthy, and you're playing a part in this collective consciousness, and you're bringing stories back to God. Live your life. Live your life for you, not for anybody else. But honor yourself and honor others, because that's important too. So may you be blessed this Friday and this weekend, and I'll see you when I see you.